Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome back. We are going to conduct our work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, January 23rd, 2023. It's approximately 1:30 p.m. If you're just joining us, the City Council met as a TID board at 1 o'clock, and so this is the part 2 of our meetings for today. So before we begin, we always have our pets of the week, and Jennifer Martinez from our communications office is going to introduce our cat and dog, right?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Jennifer Martinez with the City's Communications Office, and today there is a new cat and dog to get to know, and I will begin with Her Highness, Queen Catherine. Queen Catherine is a 4-year-old, at first shy girl, who is a little intimidated when presented with new environments, but to help her get through them, she loves to be pet and scratched. And if you spend just a little bit of time with her, she'll be quietly purring and nuzzling in your hands. She's looking for someone to help her feel safe and someone that can provide a forever home. And then we have Angel. This is a 5-year-old girl. She's a little bit excited to see people, especially if she's behind a fence. She's really as sweet as can be. She's a good girl to take out on walks, and she does already know how to sit. Caretakers are under the impression that Angel might have some sort of allergy and are thinking a grain-free diet could help her. And even with these dietary concerns, she is 100% still worth the time. If you'd like to meet Angel or Queen Catherine, you can contact the ASCMV. The number to call is 3820018. And if you have a little free time this Saturday, stop on by Petco from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the adoption event that will take place there. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next is going to be our jobs of the week, and is Giselle Palomares here? Yeah, from the New Mexico Workforce Connections.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Giselle Palomares. I'm with New Mexico Workforce Connection. For the jobs of this week, we have City of Las Cruces. They are hiring a commercial plumber that pays $20 an hour and will be open until filled. White Sands Missile Range is hiring a food and beverage attendant that pays $16 an hour, and that closes, or that actually already closed, that closes December 29th of this year. A Mountain Construction is hiring a heavy equipment operator, and that pays $13 an hour to $24 an hour depending on experience, and that closes on February 9th. Keep Commissionary Network, LLC, is hiring a food service worker, and that pays $13 an hour, and that closes April 12th. El Paso Electric Company is hiring a line maintenance supervisor, and that pays $96,000 to $135,000 a year depending on experience, and that closes February 11th. And American Red Cross is hiring a senior administrative coordinator in sales, and that pays between $23 an hour to $31 an hour depending on experience, and that closes April 16th. And as always, to connect with New Mexico Workforce Connection, you can visit them in person at 226 South Alameda Boulevard, or you can contact them by phone at 575-524-6250. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Giselle. And just to throw in there for the commercial plumber, even though it's at $20 an hour, plus benefits. So those probably amount to about $7 an hour because they get medical, dental, retirement. Yeah, so, yeah, but thank you for that. Okay, so we have 2 items on the agenda. One is the Metropolitan Redevelopment Area Designation, and a familiar face to all of us, Chris Favor, is here to start it off, and I think our consultant is going to be joining us via Zoom.
That is correct, Mayor.
Groundwork Studio.
Good afternoon. Mayor, City Council, Chris Favor, Economic Development for the record. We are going to present today, our consultants are going to present today for the first step in the MRA designation process. As you know, this is a project the city's been working on for a while. In the fall, we contracted with Groundwork Studios to begin the process of looking at the city's infill and trying to determine how much of that, if any, could be designated as an MRA. And so they've been working on that for the last several weeks. This is going to be their presentation and their recommendations. And then from there, we have an open house this evening upstairs in City Hall room 2007 from 5 to 7. That's an open house to talk about this process and the work session, the things that come out of the work session today. And then again tomorrow at 10 a.m., I think 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at Cruces Creatives, will be doing another work session, or excuse me, open house for those who couldn't make it tonight. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Erica Rober. She's with Groundwork Studio. We also have another one of our colleagues who's on Zoom, and so she'll be available to answer questions if Erica should need to bring her in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Councilors, City Manager. Thank you for having us today for a presentation on the designation of a second Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, or MRA for short, in Las Cruces. My name is Erica Robers. I'm a Community and Natural Resource Planner at Groundwork Studio, a landscape architecture and planning studio who's assisting the City of Las Cruces in the MRA designation process. I'm joined by Maren Neldum, who is also a Community and Natural Resource Planner at Groundwork Studio. Is Maren on, Chris?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Maren.
Okay.
And Maren, what is your last name again?
It's Neldum.
Neldum, N-E-L-D-A-M.
Okay,
Neldum.
great.
Yeah, I apologize that I'm not present. I'm actually in an office right now. I was exposed to COVID, and so I want to just respect everyone's safety today. So thank you for having me. Today we're going to be giving an overview of metropolitan redevelopment areas and how they support revitalization in communities around New Mexico. This will be followed by a discussion of the MRA assessment and designation process that we are currently working on in Las Cruces to identify and designate additional MR area or areas in the city. Next slide. A metropolitan redevelopment area, as codified by the New Mexico state statute, allows for the contribution of public resources to private entities for redevelopment projects. These are areas that the local municipality is targeting for increased public and private investment to stimulate local economic vitality and community building activities. It is important to note that the statute requires that the MRA designation is followed by a separate planning process, and that should include in-depth asset identification, economic evaluation, and community engagement in the creation of recommendations for redevelopment strategies and projects within the MR area. That planning process can't begin until after the designation resolution is adopted. The designation of an MRA and the subsequent MRA plan gives a local municipality more flexibility to support private redevelopment projects without violating our state's anti-donation clause. The New Mexico anti-donation clause prohibits public agencies like the city or state from giving public monies and resources to private entities. However, with an MRA designation, public resources may be contributed to private redevelopment projects like the sale or lease of publicly owned properties at less than market rate, the provision of staff time and technical assistance, infrastructure development, and sometimes direct contributions and grants. MRAs do not in themselves create redevelopment. The added flexibility that they provide in public-private partnerships actually work in combination with a number of other contextual mechanisms, such as the local market, policies and economic development strategies, as well as state programs and funding sources. Without getting too far into the weeds, we thought it might be helpful to distinguish between a tax increment finance district, also called a TIF, and a tax increment development district, or a TID. TIFs are specifically enabled by the MRA, and they generate funds through an increase in property taxes after establishing the TIF baseline. A few other communities in the state, including the South Valley in Albuquerque and downtown Silver City, have created a TIF to generate funds to support MRA projects. Because the TIF is based on property tax only, it may or may not generate much funding depending on property tax value and increase over time. The Las Cruces downtown MRA uses a tax increment development district, which is based on gross receipts tax increment. TIDs tend to increase much more significantly and raise more funds than property tax revenue over time. While an MRA is not required to create a TID, in order to adopt one, 51% of all property owners within the proposed district must be in support of it, and it must also be approved by the state. Similar to the MRA, TIDs are guided by a plan and overseen by a TID board. I don't need to go into that much detail. You already were at the meeting. Whether a TIF or a TID is recommended to pair with any of the proposed MR areas designated by this process is really something that should be thoroughly evaluated in the next phase, the MRA planning process. We want to be clear about what the MRA process does and does not do. In terms of incentives, the MRA does allow the city to offer incentives to property and business owners to make improvements to their buildings and lots that improve the appearance of those buildings and encourage business. It does not provide government resources for the indiscriminate benefit of private entities. This can sometimes be a community concern. Public-private partnerships allow the city to sell or lease public property below market value and enter into development agreements for projects that are guided by the MRA plan and supported by the community. They are not intended to allow the city to give away resources without clear community benefits, and they are used in areas where redevelopment would not otherwise occur. While an MRA is not required for public infrastructure projects, it does work hand in hand with public infrastructure improvements that improve access, appearance, and support local businesses and housing development. These improvements are never intended to displace people or redevelop properties in ways that are not supported by the community. When MRA projects are implemented, they help increase commercial activity, build a stronger local business market, and sense of place. MRA designation does not decrease or negatively affect property values or allow the use of eminent domain. Now, to provide some context, moving on to the next slide, we'd like to share some examples of projects enabled by MRAs around New Mexico to help describe some of the possibilities. There are over 40 MRAs in rural and urban communities around the state. We're going to breeze through some of the financing strategies, public-private partnerships, and revitalization programs that have been made possible by these MRAs. None of these are being proposed for Las Cruces specifically at this time, but the process of identifying these projects will come during the MRA planning process. But we do find these examples helpful in describing some of the potential approaches and outcomes in an MR area, so we can begin to envision what that might look like here. In Albuquerque, at the time that the old Albuquerque High School MRA was designated, there were approximately 5 different TIF districts that in total generated about $245,000 a year. We included this to highlight that TIF districts do not typically generate sufficient revenue for catalytic project implementation. So the city tends to have to rely on a lot of other funding sources, such as the low-income housing tax credit, historic preservation tax credits, capital outlay, et cetera, to support these public-private partnerships. In contrast, the Las Cruces Downtown MRA works in combination with a TID, which relies on the gross receipts tax increment. This type of district tends to generate significantly more funding, and in Cruces, so far, it has provided over $21 million in downtown infrastructure project funding. We've also included Lovington as an example of how MRAs can leverage other funding tools such as LEDA, or the Local Economic Development Act, to implement projects that are laid out in the MRA plan. A great project example is the Drylands Brewery. The property located in their downtown was a gas station that burned down in the 1970s. And after the city inherited the property, they tried for many years to sell it unsuccessfully. But when the downtown was designated as an MRA, they were able to sell it for less than market value. It sold at $100 as part of an RFP that was that had conditions regarding how the property would be developed. New Mexico Main Street provided support, LEDA funds were used, and of course the developer had to provide some of their own investment. The brewery opened in 2017 and has been a very successful location for community gathering and job creation. The Clovis Hotel redevelopment is a great example of public-private partnerships that allowed for the very costly remediation and restoration of a historic hotel and its repurposing as a mixed-use development with affordable housing and retail. The Albuquerque Elgato Motel is another public-private partnership that supported the revitalization of a historic Route 66 motel with affordable housing, hotel rooms, and micro-retail and restaurant pods. This has been an extremely successful project for incubating small local businesses. New Mexico Main Street and many municipalities around the state have used facade and retail improvement grant programs. Las Cruces has one downtown. These programs are used to incentivize and support businesses to improve their buildings and storefronts or make needed updates and improvements to their building interiors. These programs are extremely important for downtown revitalization and historic preservation strategies. The Farmington Outdoor Recreation Business Incubation Program has been instrumental in supporting the outdoor recreation industry in Farmington. The city remediated the warehouse that we can see here in this photo and then leased it below market rate to 2 outdoor recreation businesses that were just getting off the ground. They wanted to be near downtown and close to the Animas River. The support of the city allowed these businesses to get their feet under them before having to pay full price for the property.
So now we're going,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Erica.
now we're going to discuss the MRA assessment process that we have been engaged in since November. So here we see a map of the quote-unquote study area, which is the area we're working in to evaluate eligibility for MRA designation. It generally overlaps with the infill development area, but we're considering areas adjacent to the boundaries as well. The IDO is an area highlighted by the city due to its high numbers of vacant and underutilized parcels of land and need for redevelopment strategies. The study area was selected by the city based on several previous planning efforts. So to be eligible for MRA designation, an area needs to exhibit a combination of the following economic and physical conditions: high unemployment, low income levels, low business activity, vacant or underutilized properties, deteriorating buildings and/or public infrastructure, unsafe conditions, housing deficit, zoning conformance issues, or obsolete planning and platting. So our team evaluated social, economic, and physical data and conducted an on-the-ground investigation or existing conditions assessment to determine which areas within the study area meet these criteria, while also having potential for successful redevelopment efforts. We did extensive GIS analysis of various indicators both at the census tract and block group level. This helps us to assess the IDO more broadly and to focus on areas within the IDO that had greater levels of the indicators present. We looked at indicators such as households below the poverty line, the unemployment rate, vacant housing units. We also looked at vacant parcels and vacant commercial buildings. The rates of unemployment, vacant housing, and households below the poverty line all support an MRA designation to spur increased economic investment and development in the area. We also reviewed existing city policies and plans, such as Elevate Las Cruces, the El Paseo, Apodaca, and Amador Proximo blueprints, and others to consider how different plan and character overlay districts lined up with the data. These areas have undergone significant community planning processes, and the plans can provide an important foundation and framework for a future MRA plan. We included other focus areas which did not have adopted boundaries and plans, but showed some of the indicators that we were looking for. In December, we conducted a 2-day field investigation and documented various MRA criteria. During the visit, we were looking for various indicators such as vacant and underutilized parcels, particularly along commercial corridors. We documented vacant commercial properties, sidewalk and street conditions, the conditions of various public infrastructure and facilities, and the prevalence of vandalism, litter, and unmaintained landscaping. Based on our evaluation of the data, the entire IDO could be designated as an MRA. Some areas have more and/or greater concentration of indicators than others. The El Paseo South Solano area has the greatest number of key indicators for MRA designation in the IDO. There are different approaches to MRA designation, and we're going to discuss some of the approaches that Las Cruces could consider and our recommendations for designation at this time. The Metropolitan Redevelopment Statute is extremely flexible, and based on our data analysis and assessment, the entire IDO could be broken into various districts, and all of it could be designated. The challenge with this approach is that due to the size of the area, this would dramatically increase the cost and the time frame for the MRA planning process and would likely create capacity challenges for staff and future implementation. The City of Farmington designated 4 districts in 2005. It took them several years to complete the plan for these areas, and in 2018 they updated the plan, partly because they have only had the capacity to implement improvements in one district at a time, and the MRA plans only remain relevant for a certain period. Another approach would be to select 2 to 3 districts. This could reduce the cost and time frame for the planning process compared to designating the entire IDO. But many of the potential areas are still much larger than the existing downtown MRA, and it could create challenges for implementation by spreading attention across various areas all at once. The City of Albuquerque typically works on project implementation in 2 to 3 MRA districts at a time, but this is possible partly because they have a Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency that has approximately 4 to 5 full-time staff. Another approach, and the one that we are recommending today, is to designate one area, complete the planning process for that area, and then designate and plan additional MR areas as staff and resource capacity is built. There are some important considerations beyond just what the data tells us about MRA qualification. To be designated, an MRA must meet the statutory criteria for quote-unquote blight designation, but it also should have existing community planning processes and adopted plans that can provide a foundation and framework for the MRA planning process, such as the aforementioned plans in the El Paseo and Apodaca areas. This also helps to identify initial revitalization goals for that area and whether MRA tools are appropriate or needed to accomplish these goals. Most MRAs around the state and country are anchored by a commercial or industrial use, such as a commercial corridor or a neighborhood center, a former industrial district, and the most common are downtown and adjacent areas. When considering how many and what size of area to designate, it's also vital to assess city and community capacity for the planning and implementation process. Our recommendation is to start with the designation and planning process for 1 or 2 MR areas within the El Paseo and South Solano area. Now we'd like to share a little more information about the MR designation and planning process timeline. As you can see, right now we are basically approaching number 2 on this timeline. We've completed the MRA assessment and we are moving into the MRA designation process. This requires a resolution that is heard at a public hearing. Prior to the hearing, there will need to be 2 public notices that go out at least 21 days before the hearing. Once the resolution is adopted, the area is designated and is eligible for funding support for MRA plan development through the NMFA. Our next steps are to select the designation approach, finalize the boundaries, complete the designation report and resolution, issue these public notices, and then have the council hearing on the resolution, which we would like to complete in March. We are also going to be hosting public open houses this evening and tomorrow to follow up on the webinars that we hosted at the beginning of this month. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we'd like to open things up for discussion. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We're ready to field any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Erica. I'll just start with Councilor Graham, Bencomo, and Flotis, if that's okay.
Sounds good. I didn't look to see if anyone had, okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much to both of you for the presentation. So I think I understand based on what you just said, when I'm looking at this map, so the darker blue is an existing neighborhood plan?
That's correct. The
Okay.
darker blue is the El Paseo blueprint.
Okay, great. And then the focus area, does it get treated any differently than the rest of the MR area?
It does not. The only reason it's separated is just to highlight that the darker color indicates that has already been through some community engagement and outreach. But the idea would be to link those two areas together in the
Okay.
planning process for the MRA.
Okay, great. And I wasn't sure, the statistics you provided on things like households below poverty level, unemployment, are there other data points that go into I'm sure these are just samples. Can you give me an idea of what else?
That's right. Mirren, do you want to field that one? You're right. There are more than 10 criteria we're looking at, but Mirren, maybe you want to go more into depth on that?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Erica, maybe you can scroll back to the slide that,
You're talking about the slide that the board member referenced?
No, right before that, so it covers this, so data analysis. So the statute is very flexible, and it kind of generally describes some of the conditions that you might witness in an MR area or an area that you're proposing to designate. We looked at a lot of different indicators that help us before going and doing an existing conditions assessment. So point to areas that could be designated. So we were looking at median income, households below the poverty line, unemployment rate. We were looking at population decline, median home value. We were doing some research into the real estate market in the area. We reviewed a lot of city data that was provided by the planning department. So we were looking at vacant parcels, abandoned and vacant buildings. And then when we went and did the existing conditions assessment, we were looking for prevalence of deteriorating buildings, missing or deteriorating infrastructure. We were looking at the conditions of the street and sidewalks. And then, some other kind of more minor, these show up, vandalism, litter, and illegal dumping.
Okay, thank you. Because I think looking at the El Paseo and South Solano, a large chunk of which I represent, the overriding public concern is crime there. And we have an allusion to crime with vandalism, litter, illegal dumping, and I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we did actually look at crime data, and that was one of the reasons that we, that elevated El Paseo and South Solano as an area to focus on.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, we've looked at both property and violent crime statistics for that area.
All right, fantastic, thanks. Chief Dominguez, did this handout make its way all the way down to you? And without asking you to be your department statistician on the fly, would you agree that this is a higher crime area in the city?
Mayor and Councilor Graham, I would. We supported the project and provided a lot of the crime statistics that they're speaking of. So yes, I would.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bencomo?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation and for all the work that you've done to get us here. I've really been advocating and pushing for this to move forward. Councilor Abeyta, myself, and one of our previous colleagues who's no longer here, he's somewhere else, he's in Congress, actually. We're in the ad hoc committee that sort of developed the El Paseo South Solano corridor. And so we've been just really waiting for this moment for a while. So I just want to express my gratitude. I also am of sort of two thoughts. because so West Picacho is one of the areas that I represent as well, and it's very much a focus area for me. I'm wondering if you did any condition assessment on that corridor.
So I'll speak to that, and then I'll let Maren piggyback as well. We did do some analysis in that area as well. I would say the biggest challenge in that area, because it has many, if not most, of the indicators on this list to be designated. However, some of the census data isn't as reliable for that area. That made it a little more challenging to evaluate with like hard numbers. But I think that district definitely was one of the highest in some of these indicators that we saw. Maren, did you want to say anything else about the West Picacho area?
No, I think you covered that well. It definitely, I think you covered that well. I wouldn't have anything to add.
And so I guess just to follow up, so we didn't leave that off as a designation. It was more like thinking about what might the city of Las Cruces have the staff capacity and resources to do at a time. But if at a later date, you wanted to come back and add that on, I mean, I think that would be a definite option for an MR district.
Okay, so that's your recommendation for now then, is to include that. Do you have thoughts about like timeline? What has that looked like in other cities where they've adopted one area and they've said, look, we're ready to move on to another? Is it like 3 years, 5 years?
There's a lot of factors into how long all of these things take. Often just the planning, the next step, the planning process often takes, upwards of a year to just finish the planning process. But again, Maren, I'm going to let you field that question. She's asking for a time frame around what we've seen in other cities.
Yeah, I think it really depends on capacity. So it's going to involve determining, the time frame for bringing on a consultant for the MRA plan, going through that planning process, developing, community-rooted strategies for revitalization of those areas, and then working towards implementation. I can't set a specific time frame because it really varies from city to city. But I do think that that 3 to 5 year time frame seems fairly reasonable. The city of Albuquerque, they're at a moment in time where they're considering whether or not they should slow down or stop designating areas. They've gone through in the last several years designating about 1 MRA per year. And so they have a lot of the commercial corridors throughout the city are designated at this point. And that's kind of spreading resources thinly, and it's also working against some of the goals of an MRA, which are to incentivize redevelopment in areas that it wouldn't otherwise occur. I think that that's not really a challenge with 2 districts, but it does tend to be helpful to start with 1 district and really signal to private investors that this is an area that the city is focusing on and is interested in developing partnerships for, and then bringing on additional districts as projects are implemented.
Thank you for that answer. Right, I totally understand that's a tough question to throw at you.
Yeah.
I will say this, and maybe I'll keep having these conversations with EFO, because this is where it gets tough sometimes, because I hear you say like staff capacity, and I take that very seriously. Staff do an incredible job here, and sometimes I'm like, that 6 months, that's a long time. And so this is sort of where that rub happens, though, because I'm also trying to advocate for a part of my district that needs a lot of care and love and support. And there's many reasons, as you saw, why West Picacho feels like an important focus area to include, not to pick over, but to include within the El Paseo South Solano corridor. For many reasons. One of the biggest reasons, and one of the examples you showed for me, is motel rehab opportunities. We are experiencing a tremendous housing crisis, and I recently heard from an officer, Climac, who says, one of those motels, if they just did some improvements, like added a kitchenette, they could perhaps hold people from that are currently experiencing homelessness who have vouchers, but they don't have that kind of cash. Like, they just don't have those kinds of opportunities, and a lot of them have come to the table and said, we want to be of help. And there is a lot of motels, as you saw, on West Picacho. And so for me, this area feels like a really important one to keep fighting for and advocating for, because if anything else, because of that important factor of the opportunity and the potential to have more affordable housing partnerships with folks. And so I'll say that. I'd be curious to hear what staff have to say about that. And if I can say now, like, I don't think that area necessarily has to be as big as El Paseo, South Solano, but I am going to keep pushing for the inclusion of that, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to really consider that as well. And so I'll leave it at that, I guess. But I did have follow-up questions regarding some of the motel rehab, actually, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what those private-public partnerships look like in some of those cities in New Mexico.
Sure.
Yeah, if we wanted to go back, maybe we could go back to El Vado. Yeah, so this was a public-private partnership. The city put out an RFP. They had purchased this property. There was the possibility that it was going to be condemned. And so the city saw a great opportunity for catalytic redevelopment along Central Avenue. They put out an RFP, and they connected with a private development firm that specializes in these kinds of micro retail development projects. The total project cost was approximately $7 million, but they leveraged a lot of different funding sources for this project. So they used low-income housing tax credit, equity, historic preservation tax credit, equity, capital outlay, MRA grants. So the city actually donated some funds to the project and provided technical assistance throughout the process. And so that made the redevelopment process more possible, and it resulted in 32 affordable multifamily units, 22 rehab hotel rooms, and it's a really great example of a project that has been created to support small, local, independent businesses.
Wow, that's incredible. Have you seen any partnerships, private-public partnerships for this kind of development, rehab of motels, hotels that can become affordable housing units where the city does not own the property?
A lot of the projects that we're seeing, the city has acquired the property prior to redevelopment, whether that, so the Clovis Hotel is an example of that. And part of the reason is some of these properties, for example, the Clovis hotel required significant brownfield remediation. And in order for them to access the funds for that, it was important that the city owned the property at the time of the assessment and then the remediation. It's not required, but it is often part of the process. So a lot of MR agencies are working on kind of like light land banking, so identifying vacant parcels or abandoned properties, acquiring those properties, and then working through some of the initial assessment process, putting out an RFP, and then either selling or leasing those properties to developers.
But there is nothing then that would prohibit the city partnering with privately owned motels, hotels for
Correct.
rehab, redevelopment that could end
Correct.
up as affordable housing. Okay.
Yeah, so rehabilitation programs those are really common around the state. They can be used in a lot of different contexts. So yeah, those support grants being given to, restaurants or motels or any other business in the designated MR area. And that can be for facade improvements, but also if the program is structured to provide funding for interior improvements, that's also possible.
Okay, thank you. Again, yes, thank you for all of that information. This is, I think, an exciting opportunity for Las Cruces and for some of these areas that have been experiencing some pretty bad hardships. And again, though, I will say that I will continue to advocate that West Picacho be included as in this first phase as we move forward. And would love to continue having those conversations before this comes to council for a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for your presentation to the two of you.
Thank you.
Insofar as, fortunately, we ended on this, we're on this page, the $300,000 GRT revenue. That's a good indication of a building that wasn't generating any money before that, presumably. So my question is, generally, do you do any follow-up insofar as the changes, the financial impact? Because I don't think any of that was in your presentation. That shows not just the actual project, but the outcome and the effect, the impact. And do you do that? And if you don't, why not?
So in this initial phase, the designation report, just designating, that isn't necessarily part of the report, but I'll let Maren talk about examples of evaluations that have been done to understand how much revenue has been generated.
Yeah, so I don't have.
Well, it isn't, excuse me, it isn't so much revenue per se. I would like to see data on how the human condition has improved generally, not just in dollars and cents, but how has this stabilized a community where people have jobs, a home, all of that. Do you have that data? The other question I have is MRA is a state statute, but you made reference to HUD money. So those are two separate things, but those are the areas I'd like for you to address. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We don't have that data as part of this presentation, and I don't have any of that data in front of me, but typically an MR agency or the MR board that's overseeing the implementation of projects is also tasked with tracking that type of data. I don't know if Chris or anyone from Las Cruces can speak to some of the outcomes of the downtown MRA, but we would be happy to put together some of that information and share that with council.
I think that having that information is essential, otherwise why bother? I mean, it's, if it's just going to have a Band-Aid effect and it's going to look nice for a little bit, because we're looking at real fundamental issues and they're all economic based. So that would be very helpful. And so how does the relationship between the MRA and HUD work? How does that work?
So there's a lot of the same kinds of revitalization programs that are possible through HUD funding that do not require an MRA designation. Sometimes municipalities decide to pair, kind of in the same way that we discussed with Lovington leveraging LIDA funds for the development of Drylands Brewery. So thinking about using HUD funding within an MR for affordable housing development, but pairing that with mixed-use development, so potentially developing public-private partnerships that establish, ground floor retail or office space or space for community organizations. And so you're able to pair those financing tools together, but they are separate and distinct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you both so much for your presentation. There's a lot of excitement here around the MRAs. I appreciate the work that you've done thus far. I've heard some positive remarks, people who've gone to these listening sessions and I'm looking forward to going to the open houses. I think one of the good things that the city has done is done all this planning, right? So when I look at Amador Proximo, there's a plan. When I look at the El Paseo, there was a plan years ago. We did some updating. And I'm not in disagreement. I think including the El Paseo corridor and South Solano, we should do. So my question is, and one of the things that you're saying is we gotta plan, we gotta have the consultants come and plan. Well, I feel like we've done a lot of that already. What would the planning consist of, from this point on? And I would say it wouldn't be a year. It would be, I'm thinking less than that, but I'm not a planner, so you tell me.
So I'm going to, again, I'll start off and then I'll let Maren field that as well. So part of it is that it's just part of the state statute. There has to be an additional, after the designation, there has to be an additional MR planning process. The length isn't specified, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a year. It just needs to include sufficient community engagement. As you say, there's already the El Paseo blueprint, but the South Solano area that was sort of added on, doesn't really have its own adopted plan, so that there would have to be a little bit of additional community engagement and outreach. And then additionally, I think there would need to be a little more digging in on what sorts of economic tools you would want to be using, right? Because what we just did was kind of a surface level of like, which area should be designated and does it have the indicators that show that a designation could be helpful? But we didn't do any assessment of which tools might be helpful in this area. How much affordable housing needs to be developed? Those sorts of things have really not been dug into in this initial designation. So, but I hear what you're saying. There's already been a lot of plans that have been done over the years for these areas.
And just sitting on a shelf, kind of collecting dust, which we've committed to for it not to happen that way anymore, that we would use that plan quickly, right? And so I'm not in disagreement to that.
Yeah. Maren, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would add just that the MRA planning process tends to review, in a similar way we did a very cursory review of a lot of the adopted plans for that within the IDO. The MRA plan would really dig into those plans to help kind of provide a foundation and framework thinking about revitalization strategies. And one of the really important things that comes out of a MRA planning process is identifying catalytic projects. So identifying specific vacant parcels, specific buildings that are in need of rehabilitation, and laying out a vision for how those might be revitalized in the future. It also it's really important to think about community benefit and integrating that into the planning process. So I don't want to go too much detail though into the MRA planning process because I think that that's something that the city is really going to be in charge of. That we're a consultant here for the designation.
Okay, can staff answer that then? I'm really interested in that because I think, again, I have so much in my head right now regarding that, but I think it's important to know what it is that staff is visioning around this and how quickly we can do it. What would be the time frame that we could actually get off the ground? I understand the designation, but I feel like we need input from staff about what that's going to look like and the time frames.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, Srijana Basnet, Performance Manager for the city. I can take that question. So as noted, we do have a lot of plans in place but those are broader plans. And so even if you look at the blueprint, it was really intended to be a quick and dirty plan at that point. That was literally written into the ordinance for community planning blueprints. So they don't replicate a very in-depth, detailed process for project identification. As Maren mentioned earlier, those sort of redevelopment projects, catalytic projects, would need a finer grained community engagement, and also consulting with experts and defining the financing tools that would be most appropriate. So that does require another level of planning, and it is the state requirement to do so, but that follows the designation. So what I'll say is we look to council for direction on the approach and what areas you would like to see designated as a metropolitan redevelopment area. And then we can bring forward options as to how to go about them, timeframes, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. So with that then, I had a whole slew of questions. I won't ask them, but what I will say is I think the West Picacho area needs to be included in this. I think I would agree with Councilor Bencomo that it's an area that is quite blighted, where we have a lot of issues. Probably all those elements you can check off in terms of, right, the conditions, if you will. So I'd like to see that included. And then in terms of how I guess I'm interested, and this will be I think my final question is there a tool where staff can forecast what the financial impact may be, and does that get factored into this?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, so there are revenue modeling tools that can be used. We don't currently use one at the city, but there are several out there that allow that type of analysis to be done. And I would defer to Chris if he wants to talk about the TID and how that revenue generation was projected out, and if we followed that or not. I believe we actually generated more than what was anticipated.
Right.
But if you're talking in terms of benefits other than just the dollar amounts in revenue, it would, and even just for the revenue, it would depend on what type of, whether we're doing a TIF or a TID. So these things are the next step beyond the MRA designation.
Okay.
But yes, there are ways to project out. Do we have the capacity to do that in-house right now? No, but we are actually trying to build that exact capacity.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to maybe throw out there, and I don't know, Maren or Erica, if you want to comment on this, but our consultants did go through all of these areas and compile a ranking of all the different indicators that they discovered either with their on-site field evaluations or the data. And so since there were so many different areas considered, I would maybe suggest that we, if that's available right now, to maybe just go over them briefly for the council so that they understand kind of the different things that were looked at and how they ranked, if that's useful.
I think that would be very useful. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Looking forward, I think that it's really important to make sure that we're addressing the El Paseo, South Solano area that I think was the precipice of why we're doing all these things. And so I want to make sure that remains a top priority and focus in really that plan, even as we are perhaps entertaining other areas. I just think that that needs to be really our first zone. And with that, then, I'm wondering, we're about ready to go to budget, and I've said this, I think, at every council meeting, but if we're looking at the next steps for the consultant and the plan, do we have cost estimates on what that's going to need to be for next budget cycle and to get that all phased in? Because that would be very important information for us to know. And that may be more for staff.
Definitely is. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Beta, so Srijan and I were just talking, those are things that we're looking at based on what your designations will be, then we can figure out amounts for the budget, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Obviously, this has been a priority concern, I know, for Councilor Bencomo and myself, and our neighborhoods have been very active with wanting to see some sort of movement or progress for this, and I think this is, that vital step. So I want to make sure that we're giving it all the considerations and support that it needs to be successful, and that way we can start moving maybe quicker to other zones. And so that's my comment. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Grant?
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. I just have a couple quick questions. One of them is related to just the logistics of like the dark lines and/or the zones that you designated. I'm not sure if those are based on some specific data point or if they're blurry-ish or not. And then the second part of that is, if we say we're designating a single MRA, as you sort of recommend, is it required that it be geographically bound, or can we say this MRA is really these two focus areas combined into one request that we legitimize with similar data points?
Yeah, so these are artificial boundaries, right?
Okay.
So these are boundaries that, mainly have been grouped together due to neighborhood, economic indicators. But I'm going to let Maren talk about whether or not things can be pieced together or how that works. Maren, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so you do, an MRA designation does require a specific boundary, but one of the ways to approach that if the proposal is to include West Picacho in this designation, you can designate two areas. So like for example, Clovis recently designated two different districts flanking their pre-existing downtown MRA. And so within the designation, there's two distinct boundaries. And within the MRA planning process, there's distinct strategies for each of those areas.
Thank you.
So that's completely possible within this process. So a designation does not have to be just one area. It can be multiple districts. You just want to think about whether or not designation at this time. If implementation is possible in the near future, then it's appropriate to designate at this time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you again for that. I would love to hear see some of the additional data that Srijana alluded to. So thank you guys.
You're welcome.
So let me ask a question. As far regarding our infill that the city has designated as infill areas, how does that compare with some of the proposals, proposed areas? Have you ever put a map over it to see? It looks like a lot of it is the same.
Mr. Mayor, this is Srijana Vasnet. The map in front of you right now, that is the dash line is the current infill district overlay boundaries. So as you can see, almost all of the study areas and blueprint areas fall within that boundary. So you could say that, yes, the infill is the prime area for redevelopment.
And so my question would be, would it be harmful to have the whole infill area designated as an MRA?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that was option one that the consultants presented, and the only downside would be just the sheer scale of that for implementation.
Yeah, and because I think that way there, for those who want to develop it, then it's available instead of having to come back to the city. Because what if hypothetically, I know the Amador Proximo is going to hopefully be used for the sound movie theater, a movie set. But what if that had been left out and some investors like that area, then they got to come back. Whereas if we just designate it, because we're just saying it's available, we're not saying that you have to use that. I think that would make it a little bit easier. And then second of all, for those new council members, the infill, the city has waived a lot of fees to accelerate the development of that area, such as building permits and it just makes it a little bit, it's not a huge amount, but it could actually, it's some incentives. And so because you can still use those incentives with the MRA.
Mr. Mayor, and I'd like Maren to maybe jump in a little bit, but the one thing that the MRA allows is the TIF as a financing tool, but other financing tools like the TID, for example, is independent of whether there's an MRA or not. So if you wanted to establish financing tools, not all of them have to be contingent on MRA designation.
Maren, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think it makes a lot of sense to want to identify as many areas as possible. The challenge is that you must go through an MRA planning process in order to utilize the tools that are enabled by designation. So, and the primary ones are public-private partnerships, getting around the anti-donation clause, and TIF financing. And so there are other tools available to the city for redevelopment that do not require, that do not necessitate MRA designation. So I think the challenge that has been laid out with designating a lot of areas at this time is that it will dramatically increase the cost and time frame of the planning process. So that would delay the period of time in which you can start moving towards implementation. And a lot of cities that have worked on designating multiple districts at one time end up only implementing in one district at a time, just because of capacity. So like we referenced previously, Farmington, they designated 4 districts all at once, and they went through an extensive planning process. I think from the time of designation to the completion of that plan was about 3 or 4 years, which is lengthy, and I think that there were delays beyond the actual length of the planning process. But they then focused on the downtown MRA, and once they completed a lot of the projects that were laid out in the vision and strategies of that MRA plan, they returned to the planning process because they realized that that initial MRA plan was no longer sufficiently relevant. So I think it's okay to designate multiple areas, but just to keep in mind how capacity might be impacted.
Or could you also, like for this area here that's already shaded, could you make that phase 1 so that you can work on that, and then the one that hasn't been worked on yet, maybe make that phase 2 and bring that to council if they want us to move forward with phase 2. But that way there, you eventually cover the infill zone.
Yeah, so I think that if you wanted to designate multiple areas and kind of have those in your back pocket, so it's totally possible to designate and pass resolutions for multiple MRA boundaries all at one time, and then approach those based on capacity. So, maybe choose 1 or 2 districts to invest for an MRA plan, pursue implementation in a couple districts, and as capacity is built, move on to additional MR areas.
Okay, well, I just wanted to put that out there for my colleagues so that they had yet another area to look at, so, all right.
I would add, though, I think, speaking with folks from MR at City of Albuquerque, they have noted that one of their challenges with having a lot of different districts is it really, it starts to weaken some of the power of the incentives. So areas that are doing a little bit better off to begin with tend to attract reinvestment first if the same kinds of tools and partnerships are available in those areas. So it can be beneficial to focus on areas that have the greatest need first and really start sparking reinvestment in those areas before moving on to areas that maybe don't need quite as much support.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if there's any members of the public who would like to comment on this. Raise your, oh, yes.
I'm sorry, there was some more additional data they were
Oh,
going
I'm
to show
sorry.
us.
Okay.
Maren, are you able to pull that up?
You know, I don't know if I mean, I can look through the file, but I don't believe that I'm able to share from this computer. And so I would say that, so the spreadsheet, the analysis that we did is something that we can share with the city after this. And I don't know if that would be possible, Srijan, if we could pass that along. It's a very basic tool, so all of those data, those indicators that we referenced previously are included in it. And so it's not a weighted ranking tool, it's a very basic ranking tool. So yeah, basically if the presence of any of these indicators earned each area points. And so we added those points, we totaled them to rank the different areas based on the prevalence of indicators. And so that's really how El Paseo South Solano was elevated to the top. But we can share that spreadsheet so you can get a picture of how other areas ranked. And West Picacho was definitely up there.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, if we don't have it right in front of us, that's okay. I know we have to move on, but if you could share that with Christine so that she could share that with us, that would be really good. I guess this is my question for staff, for Ifo or Shoshana. What is the feasibility right now, you think, of doing 2 designated areas, or like Councilor Corrin said, sort of have these, for example, these 3 corridors be one area?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, that's a tough question to answer just because of all the other projects going on. So if I were to look at just the MRA as the sole kind of objective for the next year or 2, I would say you could definitely tackle 1 district per year if it's sized the way that some of those blueprints are sized. If we were to continue at current capacity, doing all of the other planning work that we're doing and implementation work, that would probably be a stretch in itself. So it'd probably be a 2-year estimate. But having said that, capacity is dependent on the resources that we are provided with. So, and that I would say is up to the city manager and city council.
Okay, thank you. I will take that very much to heart as we head into the February budget conversation, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bencomo, I look to Srijan because her and I have talked about this, and I know Srijan had some opinions about it, and I think just to add on to exactly what Srijan mentioned, so capacity and then also priority, meaning what our goals are for each of the areas. So if we can identify what those action items will be, then I think we can make a better decision. So if we're talking about specific, sure, yeah. If we're help or assistance with specific businesses that we've talked about in the past, we might be able to handle from a capacity side if we can identify those actions. We can have conversations about that. But we did talk about, having one so that we can focus, do it right, plan it out right, and then move on to the next. But again, we can look at the action items as we move forward.
Okay, so is there any members of the public who wish to speak on, have any comments you'd like to talk? Just raise your hand first, so I can just see how many. Just one? Okay. You can come forward, Israel. 3 minutes, please. Just state your name.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Israel Chavez. I just wanted to make a slight point about the IDO being used as the overlay for this. In addition to it excluding the Picacho area, which is incredibly important, and I encourage, while it may be difficult for the city to implement for staffing, I mean, I think we just need more staff because this is, I mean, we're leaving behind a lot of folks. I would also look at how many applications came through for the Main Street area. But going back to the infill, the South Mesquite Historic District is excluded from infill development using that ordinance. And so to say that, well, everybody gets to use the IDO is not quite accurate, right? So there's the historic districts that have been excluded from the IDO, similar to how Picacho has been, the West Picacho area has been excluded. That's an exclusion in the ordinance. This South Mesquite overlay ordinance excludes it from the IDO. So historic districts like South Mesquite overlay haven't been able to use the IDO much. And then if we say, well, we're also not going to include that in the in this process, we're pushing it back further. So I think there's an analogy there for West Picacho, which definitely needs that. And I don't think we need to be afraid or I always feel like planners are telling us, well, we got to do more planning, and it's sort of like the fox guarding the hen house in that respect. I think we really needed action, and how many plans do we have to do? I mean, councilors have said, Mayor, that there are plans sitting on shelves collecting dust, and so this excessive planning doesn't put people in housing. It doesn't get them food. And in my capacity with the Anti-Aged Institute, my commitment is ensuring that we're really focused on not just really nice stuff like Albuquerque's done, but something that makes sense for struggling communities like West Picacho, like South Mesquite Historic District, like Solano. I think all three of those are really good candidates, but we can't just say, oh, well, sorry, you're just going to have to wait until we have enough time. There's so many people struggling. So appreciate your time. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Israel. Okay, so, Councilor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree, Mr. Chavez, with the spirit of what you're saying. I wish that I could create a whole bunch more staff positions. I also agree with that. But what I think the point is, and the money side is one thing, the staff time side is the other. So if we're asking, this is way simplified, I get that. If we designate 5 areas and tell staff they can spend 2 hours a week on each area versus designating 1 area and saying staff can spend 10 hours a week on that area, I think that is the spirit of the MRA program as I'm understanding it. And I also, these are gut-wrenching decisions. These make me feel literally sick, I'm not kidding, to say, oh, well, we're gonna have to leave one part out. But I understand the theory behind it, and I also do not want to be capricious with staff time, because I don't feel that's my domain. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, so I wanted to come up here and just say that in order for us to move forward with this process, where we come back to you in March with the actual resolution for designation, we have to come out of this meeting with actual boundaries, because we have to move forward to advertise that. So we kind of need to see which direction you guys are going in terms of the boundaries that you want to put forth for designation. Just wanted to make sure that was made clear to you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question for Chris.
What's that?
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Literally boundaries?
Mr. Mayor, Flores, yes, literal boundaries.
So we would probably have to look at what's been in the making first, right? Such as El Paseo, Solano. I know Gabe Vasquez was really adamant and passionate about something being done there.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores. So if you go back to the proposals that they put together, they have the three options, all the way from the entire IDO to 2 or 3 areas to just one area. So we kind of sort of need to decide which way we're going in that direction, and then specifically if you pick options 2 or 3, which areas and which boundaries. And they've kind of spelled that out on this map here where they have some, where's that other map? This one here, so you could see this is the one for the El Paseo, South Solano area. You can see the boundaries that this one would include.
Well, Chris, given your learned experience, what do you recommend, or what do you see as being expeditious implementation? No, you don't have that? How about you, Srijana? One of you has to have that vision, or that knowledge, or that hope. Or
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gandara, I think staff is leaning towards number 3 approach, but this is an entirely city council decision to make.
And wait, can you imagine how difficult it is for us, because we're not doing your job, so we don't really know, all the nuts and bolts it takes, and I really admire and thank you for your work. So that's why I'm asking, how would you approach this to make it expeditious, effective, and doable?
If it helps, I would probably look at this in terms of how we can define a pilot MRA first, to kind of define all of the challenges and opportunities. There is a danger to going too fast, too far, and I completely understand the desire to do everything at once. But when you prioritize everything, you prioritize nothing.
Correct. So do you think that moving with the El Paseo Solano first would be the best way to approach it, since that's the one that's had a community group focusing on that, right?
So, Councilor, you are correct. It's our oldest blueprint. I will say that in terms of revising that blueprint is also essential, and of course, it's the actual state statute, so we do have to do an MRA plan. But when a plan is older than 10 years, you do want to go out to the public again and reestablish the need and the voices and the projects. So even with that, it's kind of time. But again, this is entirely up to you, and I'm sorry I can't provide more recommendation.
Yeah, and that's quite a burden to bear in terms of it being, 6, 7 people, 7 of us up here. It's really hard to, like get the magic wand going, but, it doesn't really work. So would it be helpful to, you say that we have to go back to the drawing board on the MRA, the existing MRA? Am I correct in hearing that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gandara, no, not back to the drawing board. We don't have an MRA plan in place, so we would have to establish a new MRA plan specifically to meet state statute. But what I'm saying is the plan that we do have, which is the blueprint, is pretty old. So it warrants an update. And with that in mind, the MRA plan would take care of 2 birds with 1 stone, and that's.
When you say the blueprint, are you referring specifically to?
To the community planning blueprint that City Council adopted in 2011, I believe.
Ooh la la, that was many years before I was born. So we'd have to go back to that before we can move forward? No?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gandara, no.
No.
The MRA plan should take care of
the other
details,
day,
yes.
I was, Bencomo was Flores, and today Flores is Gandara. But it's okay. I don't mind being confused.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I'm quite flattered, actually.
Councilor Flores, I keep saying Gandara for some reason.
But, you're asking for direction. Frankly, I'm not speaking for my colleagues, but I am speaking for myself. It's very hard for me to make a decision based on, and we have been informed along, these past years, 5 years for me. But but at this point, it looks like we're still at square one. Am I wrong? Yes, I hope.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, so the planning that we've done actually does provide the vision and the framework to proceed. Even to say that we want an MRA in that area, that direction was provided by the original plan. So it was not a wasted effort. The only point that I'm trying to make here is that all plans do need updating anyway. And so I'm kind of just trying to, I guess, address the concern that we are over planning. And I'm saying that's
So
not the case.
if we were to say, okay, let's move with the El Paseo Solano one, and then we go back, and then that gets in motion, and then we go back to the drawing board to make another designation?
Mayor, City Council, Elizabeth Teeters for the record. We were just talking back there about different options. You can always designate 2 areas right now. It does not mean that we have to start the planning process for both areas. So we could designate both Picacho and El Paseo now with the plan to start the planning process for El Paseo right away and then move into Picacho. That way we don't have to come back and make another designation in another few years. So that could be an option. Because that's what we're looking for right now is designation. That's the whole point of this whole process.
So, Chris, did you say you needed a resolution for this? So you're going to come back, or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, yes, we'll be coming back in March with the actual resolution to
And it'll be
adopt.
consistent with our making our choices today?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Mr. Mayor and Councilor Flores, I just want to say, when I said boundaries before, specific areas. So if you said El Paseo, South Solano, that's one area, West Picacho was another one. I didn't mean specific streets or things of that nature, so.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chris. Thank
Before I
you.
get to Councilor Bencomo, the city manager wanted to jump in real quick.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I would agree with that recommendation to have those 2 designations, and then we can come back just so we can move forward. I just want to also make mention, you know, this presentation, this is actually just part of the process, right? We have to come forward, you define that, and then we go back. The other thing I want to make mention of is, you know, there seems to be a feeling here that, you know, once we designate this area as an MRA, we can't do anything for anywhere else. Like, we have the Lift Up program, we have all these other tools available to us, like the TID, and you know, at this point, there is no funding mechanism for the MRA, right? And so it's really a designation. And so I do think, I would recommend that we have 2 designations. This allows us to move forward. I like that thought there. And then we can come back, and then we can decide how we plan. The other issue, as well as, you know, continuing further with more designations at one time, you can only have a priority number 1, right? After that, then you have 2 priority number 1s and 3 priority number 1s, and so we have to start somewhere, but I don't think it would be problematic to have 2 designations right now.
Okay. Councilor Bencomo?
Thanks, Mayor. Boundaries. I am really going to push for West Picacho to be included. I think it is a critical, affordable housing opportunity that we cannot miss out on, given the other economic development tools that could be an option for us in that area. 2nd Street to Motel is what, a mile and a half? It doesn't even have to go further out north or west. It could go to Hadley and to Shiro. Ish, right? Those streets sort of, you get my drift. You get where I'm going with this. It could even be 1 block north, 1 block south. But from 2nd Street to Motel, it is a small area. It is not as big as the El Paseo South Solano area, which is clearly a priority. That I think El Paseo, South Solano have very similar business, small business sort of assistance needs, clearly some blight, some abandoned buildings, abandoned commercial buildings. And there is a very actionable item already on West Picacho that we could pursue with private-public partnerships and ensuring that motels can be affordable housing units. So that would be my suggestion. I agree with this. Obviously, El Paseo South Solano has been a priority for a very long time, and I would continue to fight for West Picacho 2nd Street to motel.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate Councilor Bencomo and you advocating for your area. What I like to see, and we've asked, is the priority list, how you weighted each of those indicators. That would be very important for all of the areas that you've highlighted here before I can make a decision. For me, it's, yeah, we've been talking about the El Paseo and the South Solano for some time. I think that is absolutely first priority. Second, I mean, I don't know. I don't know because I don't have the data in front of me to be able to advocate. But I will say that West Picacho needs to be added. Is it a second priority? I'm not sure. And so I also think that with that, and we have over the years since I've been here, limited staff and the ability to move forward in some of these things because, you know, we're sort of all over the place. There's so much need. The need is so great. So I will be advocating for extra FTEs, additional FTEs to help, and maybe, because it's within our scope, to develop a MRA office, if you will. And maybe that's what I'll be suggesting at our, someone please write it down and not forget, at our budget retreat. I think those are really important in order for us, because the need is so great. So again, I'd like to, and then we have the Lift Up Las Cruces, right in that Amador area where we do have a blueprint. And where we're focusing our time and attention. So I could very well argue that that should be the next place, right? But I won't. But I like to make that point. And so if we can have that information before, and I don't think that necessarily, I don't know why we're waiting till March. Is that because that's just the way the process is in terms of what you as staff have to do to get the resolution together, Chris?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, yeah, the state mandates a certain amount of time back where things have to be advertised.
Got you.
So based on that schedule, the soonest we could get it is March 20th to come back for resolution. And we are trying to get the weighted slide, so they're going to email it to Shrujana, then we're going to try and get it up here. Marin's just not able to share via the way the Zoom is set up right now, so we're trying to find another way so you guys can see that weighted information here during this meeting.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. How will the changes in the MRA that we are advocating for at a state level, how would that affect any of this, or will it?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, so that's an excellent question. If those changes at a state level were to happen, that would allow council to adopt those changes into any existing or future MRAs, which means if you were to set up West Picacho MRA, you could go in and set up the funding source so that you would be pulling into it, similar to how we do the TID downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, those would be a game changer for MRAs because you would have the ability to create a funding mechanism through the actual designated area.
And we will know, when is the last day of the session? Oh, a few weeks after, because the governor has so much time to sign everything in. Okay, all right, that's a good, something we should really consider. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Abeyta.
Yeah, thank you. To put in my comments just to make sure that I have the designation, my first choice obviously is going to be the El Paseo Neighborhood and Planning Area. And then I will suggest the Alameda Picacho area as the second, and those will be my recommendations, with the strong advisement to make sure that if we are going to do this program, to make sure we do have the appropriate funding and staff to do it right. I do agree that if we are going to do something, we need to do it well, and I would rather do one thing really well than about 3 things halfway, because I don't think that's helpful to our community either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Graham?
Yeah, I do want to weigh in, but I'll wait since it looks like we have the spreadsheet up on the screen. If you could come back to me after that, thank you.
So I would say that I just want to preface this. This is an unweighted ranking tool. So we did not create any sort of weighted ranking for any of the indicators. It's a very basic tool that we use to help us in focusing in different areas for our existing conditions assessment. So you can see on the far right those numbers, those totals. This is not like a precise measure, but El Paseo South Solano has 12. That neighborhood east of that has 10. West Picacho also has 10, and others were, they're all clustered. Every single area within the IDO demonstrates a number of indicators that would support designation. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. West Picacho actually is 8, and that's, I think that's one of the challenges of reviewing census data for that area, is that the census data really doesn't track some of the populations that live in that area. So it's actually the Apodaca lift up area, and a lot of that comes from the lift up section in particular.
There you have it.
How did you, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
how did you identify the the abandoned properties? What was the?
We received vacant parcel data from the city, so we were looking at both vacant parcels, vacant commercial, and vacant residential. There was abandoned property data. We were told to look at that, knowing that it's not regularly updated, so it might not be completely accurate. But we noted where concentrations of, that is, Mesquite actually had some of the highest concentrations of abandoned properties. I think that was followed by El Paseo South Solano.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that when we identified the lift-up area and sent numerous correspondence to the residents, handfuls, large stacks returned back as abandoned residential. And so I was really concerned about that because I didn't think that we had identified or had a place to make that notation, right? And so it's something that I think if we're going to continue to do this and utilize this particular matrix, that somewhere, somehow, we have to update that and keep that updated. It was important to me, and I had let IFO know that there was a number of abandoned residential properties that are just sitting there uninhabitable. They may not look bad, but they're just sitting there, and that always concerns me. And I hear Councilor Bencomo, just in the nature of the geographic area, that those hotels that need so much updating, right? And just seeing that it's an entry point into our city, the numerous complaints that we get about the way it looks sometimes. And so I can sympathize, empathize, and feel like, yeah, that's something that we should probably look at in terms of the number of tools that we can, use to lift that community up, more specifically to affordable housing. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilor Graham?
Yeah, so just to weigh in, because I think you're doing your little tally over there, Mayor. I'm sure that we contracted with these consultants for good reason and that they have a lot of expertise. So my inclination is to go with the recommendation of one MRA designation. However, I'm definitely willing to add the West Picacho as priority 2. And on a side note, I now have a personal wager with myself of what we get first, a shade structure or an MRA.
I was actually playing Sudoku, so no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so actually, Ifo, you had an idea that you wanted to move forward. You thought a couple of what you heard, you were either going to bring this back or you're going to move forward with the two areas you were talking about.
Yeah, Mayor, just what I mentioned earlier, that I don't see a problem with having two designations as recommended by Elizabeth. But I would like the priority, as was mentioned by Councilor Graham, to have a 1 and 2 priority, just so we're clear, so there's not more than one number one priority, right?
Did you want to you want to include the 2 areas you were talking about, or?
So I know it's been discussed, El Paseo and Solano would be our recommendation, and then West Picacho as the second.
Okay, I just want you to all know, and I've done this in the past, that I've abstained. I won't have really any discussion on this because of the fact that I have a business there on South Solano, which I've tried to have you all remove like umpteen times, but don't want to do it, so I'll just stay out of this. Okay? Let's go back to my puzzles. Yeah, okay. Okay, it looks like that's it. Looks like you have the direction. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And yeah, Shoshana, Elizabeth. Okay, next we're going to have the municipal court update, and we have Judge Joy Goldbaum with us. Judge.
Good afternoon. Happy Lunar New Year, everyone. I am Judge Joy Goldbaum, Municipal Court.
Excuse me, Judge, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Judge Joy Goldbaum from the Las Cruces Municipal Court, and assisting me today is Don Schultz, one of our court managers. I was really hoping that Miguel Munoz would come, partly because I wanted to give him a really big shout out. He took my scrambled handwritten notes and turned them into these slides and did just a really good job. I hope that after my presentation today, you will agree with me that the courts do have a role to play in the quality of life for residents of Las Cruces. I'm also really glad, I saw Mr. Garcia. Oh, you're still here, thank you. I'm glad he's here because I did want him to know that I take his criticism seriously. I can't always act on that in a way that he would like, but I do listen. So basically, I'm going to click pretty quickly through some of these slides. They're kind of for your reference only, and I have a few miscellaneous comments at the end. So the first slide is what we're covering, the definitions. You can look at that at your leisure. I wasn't sure how familiar people were with what happens at the court, the procedure, the terms we use. I think the two I would just kind of draw your attention to are penalty assessment. That's most traffic offenses, things that people can sign the ticket when they're stopped and agree to pay it within 30 days. And arraignment is also called first appearance or initial appearance. We are generally doing those remotely still, but they can be done in person. And what happens at the first appearance is the person learns the possible penalties if they're convicted, including a plea, their rights, and what the pleas are. Also, on criminal or charges facing potential jail time, they are informed at that time that if they are convicted of a jailable offense, it could have a negative impact on their immigration status up to and including deportation. So the next slide, again, just for reference. Usually a traffic stop is the first thing that happens, and then the person can basically ask to go to court, or they can sign off that they'll pay the ticket. It's an admission of guilt. And you can look at that a little more at your leisure, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The next one is the criminal citation life cycle. A little more complicated because these potentially carry jail time, most of them up to 90 days and up to a $500 fine. That's also true of codes, ordinance violations. And I just went ahead and did, I think I'm forgetting to move ahead. I included DWI separately just because it really is a different animal. The fines are stiffer. Everybody's convicted is required to complete a year of supervised probation, and that is done through our county compliance office. You can see there are increasing jail time as you go up in the number of DWI convictions. Anything after a fourth could not be handled in municipal court, would have to be in district court, and it's a felony. The one thing I wanted to add, under medical use of cannabis, there is one exception, and that's if the person has a qualified user designation card for a medical condition, and they have to present that to the county compliance office. Otherwise, they cannot use cannabis or be in cannabis establishments. Just a general snapshot of the cases filed between 2016 and 2022. There wasn't anything scientific about why I picked those dates, but I didn't want to give Miguel a full-time job creating slides. So I started with 2016, and you can see in 2020, COVID hit, and that's when the number of cases being filed hit. It's very gradually creeping back up. The next slide is from 2016, a breakdown of what was filed, and I think maybe the most important thing is to look at the totals, the grand total. And if you want to look at the police department, that total is on the right. Same with 2017. 2018. Totals, again, 2019. And then 2019, the filings by month, just to kind of give you an idea that it's up and down generally. 2020, there's our grand total, and the police department total. and the number of filings by month. So you can see in 2020, if you look at March, obviously when the pandemic hit, at the very beginning, things really started shutting down. Courts were not permitted to close in New Mexico, and we never closed. We did have to transition to doing a number of things remotely, and we learned that some things work really well remotely, and some things are really difficult to do remotely. So we've gone back almost entirely to doing things in person. There are still a few exceptions. Sorry, I keep forgetting to go forward, but hopefully you were able to see that. 2021, total number of cases filed, and then by month. And 2022 through December are totals. Number of filings by month. You can see that it's just up and down. No real rhyme or reason. Office Chief may have an idea and want to weigh in on that in a minute, but the next case is dismissals in 2022 by agency. And I only broke this down for 2022 because it was really time intensive for Miguel to go back and try to collect this data. We don't really keep track of it in this nice, neat way. To my knowledge, these agencies don't. So he basically just had to go through and look at every docket, but he did a nice job coordinating that for 2022. And you can see the totals on the right. A noli pros is a dismissal by a prosecutor. If you have any questions about any of those, certainly come back to that. I've marked it as slide 19. And then here's just a nice picture snapshot of those dismissals, and a little nice graph that he did by agency. All right, this slide, police hours by month. We don't actually collect this data. I'm going to come back to this slide in a little bit. So I asked Miguel to try and come up with something, and he and I together sort of decided from just being in court, we would calculate it this way. It's not going to be exact, but no agency, including the court, keeps this information. So basically what we did is if an officer has to come to court, usually it's for a pretrial hearing. There are other things they come to court for, but we just assume it's going to be 30 minutes, give or take, because about 10 minutes of their time to get there, about 10 minutes to take care of the pretrial hearing, if they're able to, about another 10 minutes roughly to go back to whatever they were doing on their shift. So you can see it's probably pretty conservative. If an officer is appearing in court on the same day and time for multiple defendants, we just went ahead and added 10 minutes. So again, it's not scientific, but I wanted to try to give you some idea of the amount of time that officers actually spend in court. I've marked this as slide 22, and I will be coming back to that. All right, this is a slide I think I've presented, or a sheet I've presented previously. It's the cost per year that we have paid out for alternate judges. And on the bottom line, 2023, that's the city year that starts July 1. So that's only July 1 through December 31st. It's not a full year. We haven't received their invoices yet. All right, the next slide is another one that I'll come back to and harp on a bit. This is what we spend since 2016 for the panel attorneys that represent indigent defendants. So if somebody can't afford an attorney and they're facing jail time, they can apply for an attorney through the court. We do not use the public defender. We have these right now 5 attorneys, and we round robin them. They're all bilingual. So you can see 2016, it was pretty minimal. 2017 shot up, 2018 hovered a little below that. And then since then, we are spending well over $110,000 a year on indigent attorney representation. And there's a number of reasons I would like to get rid of this system, and it is one thing that I'll talk about at the end. If you look at 2023, the 81,000, that's because it's only July 1 through November 30th. So if you double it roughly and add a little to it, you'll see that we're going to be really close to that 180,000 again. All right, so the handful of things that I wanted to say about COVID, just for you to see what happened when it hit. My staff did an amazing job getting us set up to try to do everything virtually. It wasn't easy, but we kept the court open. All courts in New Mexico, it doesn't matter if they're a city court, state court, all courts in New Mexico fall under the New Mexico Supreme Court. And the New Mexico Supreme Court in March of 2020 issued the first of, I'm going to say, maybe 24 orders detailing exactly what courts could and couldn't do. The masking, the distancing, the, the plexiglass. It was a lot that we had to do, and we did it, and they would revise it maybe every 2 months, send us out a new order. Even though the city and state both had different COVID protocols, and some of them were fairly strict, but the courts are stricter and they're still in place. So even though the city and pretty much the governor don't really care if you wear a mask, when you are in a court, you do have to wear a mask. That's from the New Mexico Supreme Court. It cannot be a neck gaiter, a bandana, or a mask with an exhaust valve. And that's in courtrooms and in jury rooms. We don't have juries, so we don't have jury rooms. But we are still doing 3-foot distancing and masking at the court. Every court in New Mexico is supposed to be. And we take it pretty seriously. We provide a mask at the door to people if they understandably show up without a mask, because most people aren't masking anymore. There was a really interesting legal issue that came up during COVID. And I don't know if Ms. Garrison would like to weigh in on this, but what happened was at the beginning, we couldn't have in-person trials. We had to have them virtually. We were using GoToMeeting. So some defendants and attorneys were okay with that, fine, we would do them virtually. We did a number of trials virtually. We are required to complete a case within 182 days from that initial appearance, the arraignment, to its conclusion. That was obviously not going to be possible with some cases unless people agreed that we could do them virtually. And some defendants and attorneys refused. They said, defendant has an absolute right, and they do, a constitutional right to confront the witness against them, and we demand our in-person trial, even though the courts weren't letting us do that. So from the period of like mid-March 2020 until early June 2021, we didn't have any in-person DWI trials or other trials, but DWI was the real issue. And there is a rule in the New Mexico municipal court rules that allows a judge to make a finding that due to, what's the word, Jocelyn? Circumstances?
It would be exceptional
The
circumstances.
exceptional, thank you, circumstances. The court could simply say, we cannot do it within 182 days, and so it's continued indefinitely until we can. A number of these cases went up on appeal. Appeal from my court is to district court, but there's no single judge at district court that hears them. I think they round robin them. So some judges said, the municipal court absolutely should have had these in-person trials during the 182 days, even though we didn't have permission to do them yet. I think at least one judge agreed with our exceptional circumstance order that I was doing and said, no, that's reasonable. Ms. Garrison, do you know if any of these have gone up beyond district court to the Court of Appeals?
No, Judge Goldbaum, we did not appeal them, and as far as I know, the defense attorneys didn't either, and it was the chief judge that agreed with you, actually.
Okay, thank you. So it was kind of scrambled all over the state, and I don't know how it was in other places, but those district judges that said you absolutely had to have given them an in-person trial within 182 days, and now it's dismissed. So we lost some of those on those grounds, and I don't know, another part of the state may send one of those up on appeal, so it'll be interesting to see how that comes down. Oh, here's the language from the rule. Upon a determination by the court that exceptional circumstances exist that were beyond the control of the prosecution or the court, that prevented the case from being heard within the time period, and a written finding that defendant would not be unfairly prejudiced, the court may grant further extensions that are necessary in the interests of justice. So I felt that COVID was an exceptional circumstance and wrote, gosh, probably 30 or more of those orders, and a few of them did go up on appeal. All right. I'm going to shift now to competency and then mental health. Our state statute regarding competency, and I'm sorry I don't have this on slide, but I can get it to you if you would like. It's the state statute 31-9-1, determination of competency, raising the issue. Whenever it appears that there is a question as to the defendant's competency to proceed in a criminal case, any further proceeding in the cause shall be suspended until the issue is determined, unless the case is dismissed upon motion of a party when the question is raised in a court other than the district court. The proceedings shall be suspended and the cause transferred to the district court. So I frequently have people come in front of me that I know have previously, maybe within the last month, been determined to be not competent to stand trial. So in that situation, I am required to make a referral to district court. It doesn't have to come through me. It can come through the jail, a defense attorney, a prosecutor. But once that referral is made, and it's usually made when the person is seen frequently at the jail, it goes to district court and I lose jurisdiction. Now, I recall a few months ago, Sarah Smith raised the issue correctly that I was dismissing a lot of cases of people that were cited for trespass and shoplifting primarily. Those names were people who had been recently found not competent. And if the district court decides they're not competent, it gets sent back to me, and I am ordered to dismiss the charges and release the person. So it is not my decision. Municipal courts have no authority to make that decision. But there are probably about a dozen people in our community, mostly men, a couple of women, who frequently get referred for competency. I transfer it to district court. The district court has to order an evaluation by a psychologist, unless one was done recently, and that's frequently the case. And then the person's found not competent again. I'm ordered to dismiss the case and release them. Yes, they do sometimes go out the same day and shoplift and trespass again. So here's what's required for that determination. This is 39-9-1.1. The defendant's competency shall be professionally evaluated by a psychologist or psychiatrist or other qualified professional recognized by the district court as an expert, and a report shall be submitted as ordered by the court. And then a hearing on the issue of competency of an incarcerated defendant charged with, well, that's a felony. We don't have felonies in my court. So then it starts getting into the time limits that we have. But basically, if the person's incarcerated, they have to be evaluated within 30 days. If they're not, there's a little more time. We have a couple of psychologists on contract with district court that can perform these evaluations. But the court doesn't always order a new one because they cost in excess of $1,000 each. And understandably, the district court's not likely to order another evaluation if just 3 months ago one was done and the person found not competent. What is competency? The crudest sort of test for it is what's called the Georgia Court Competency Test, which is whether the defendant has sufficient present ability to consult with their lawyer with a reasonable degree of rational understanding, and whether he has a rational as well as factual understanding of the proceedings against him. Again, I don't make that determination. Pretty much it's in the report that's done by the psychologist, and then the district court makes a ruling on that. I think right now they're all being heard by Judge Martin. All right, here is what the municipal court rule says about insanity or incompetency. It's Municipal Court Rule 8-507. If a defendant pleads not guilty by reason of insanity, or if an issue is raised as to the mental competency of the defendant to stand trial, the action shall be transferred to the district court for further proceedings pursuant to the rules of criminal procedure for the district courts. The municipal court shall retain jurisdiction over the defendant and conditions of release until the action is filed in district court, which is usually the same day as the referral is made. So that's a kind of quick summary of how competency works. And unfortunately, whether I agree with it or not, but a number of defendants do spiral constantly through that system. All right, now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about mental health issues in the court. Because the municipal court is a misdemeanor court, we get a lot of people that have a variety of mental health challenges coming through. And so I included with my presentation, I hope some of you got a chance to glance at it, some information about the Miami model for treating mental health concerns. It's kind of the gold standard, but it's been in place for a while, and it was expensive, to get there. So what do communities that don't have that kind of money, By the way, if you haven't read it, it's really inspirational because, I mean, it's just phenomenal how well it works. But like a lot of treatment courts and other programs, it's not a quick fix. You know, it takes a while, and sometimes people have to go through it more than once. But what we are doing here in Doña Ana County is just trying to fill the gaps from the initial interaction with a person in crisis, probably it's through law enforcement, all the way through to the end of a case if it results in criminal case. So often it does. And what we are doing locally, actually, let me back up and say that a few years ago, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Nakamura, and District Judge Angie Schneider in Otero and Lincoln County got together to try and address this issue of the mental health crisis going through the courts and the jails. And so what they came up with is to use a program that's been tried and true in other places. It's got kind of a weird name. It's called the Sequential Intercept Model, or SIM, and it's used to assess available opportunities, determine gaps in service, and plan for community change. These activities are best accomplished by a team of stakeholders that cross over multiple systems, including mental health, substance abuse, law enforcement, pretrial services, courts, jails, community corrections, housing, health, social services, peers, family members, and many others. You can see that's a lot. So at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is a group that meets once a month to talk about things that affect the courts and others in law enforcement. It was determined that we should attend or create a SIM, Sequential Intercept Model, workshop, and we did that last June. There were probably 40 or so participants. And it was a full day, I think it was a day and a half, actually. And somebody from SAMHSA came to talk to us about it. SAMHSA is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a department of our Federal Health and Human Services. So they publish materials and present programs on anything and everything to do with mental health. So a number of us attended this workshop, and after that workshop, a smaller group of us decided we wanted to be a task force to try and really focus on filling these gaps. So I'm on that task force. Judge Arrieta is. We have probation and parole, lots of law enforcement. People from the university are working with us. I see that Jamie Michael's here today. Thank you, Jamie, for being here. I may have you field some questions, okay? And anyways, a number of us, we meet every 2 weeks for 2 hours, and what we're trying to do is come up with evidence-based systems to fill in these gaps. So that means really collecting a lot of data at the beginning. And we have some really great number crunchers working with us from the university and other places. So Jamie is one of the co-chairs of our task force, and the other is Kristen Drake, who is from the Peak. And so I'm just going to very quickly go through what the intercepts are. It goes 0 to 5. Intercept 0 is community services, which is probably crisis lines and crisis care continuum. Intercept 1 is law enforcement, so 9/11 and local law enforcement oftentimes leads to an arrest. Intercept 2 is initial detention and initial court hearings, first appearances, so that involves the courts. Intercept 3 also involves the courts and jails, specialty courts, jails, dispositional courts. Intercept 4 is prison and jail reentry, and Intercept 5 is parole and probation. And one of the really big themes behind SIMS is not just to give somebody short-term help and then boot them out and say, you're good now, because it doesn't work and it can't work. So we don't have the kind of building, the kind of facility that Judge Leitner had in that article that I attached. But we are still working like crazy to fill these gaps. And I think it was Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Gondara last week who referred to the Z team. Was that you? Somebody referred to the Z team. The Z team is that group that initially started with Justice Nakamura and Judge Schneider and a few others, some people from the Administrative Office of the Courts. And the Team Z is to represent the zero intercept, because that is the very beginning where most of the contact occurs. And the goal of this is to keep people from having to go through the jail and the court systems, because when you're suffering a mental health crisis, it doesn't get better if that's all you get, is charged and sentenced and so on. So if you looked at that article on Judge Leitner, it's a law review article, and it really did a great job identifying how well that Miami model works. But we think locally here on the task force that we can fill a lot of these gaps with local services. And in October, a number of us went to I guess it was a convention. What was it? A symposium. Thank you. Do you want to come up, Jamie? Come on. And had a number of really good presenters. They showed some videos from Judge Leitner. And it turns out Doña Ana County, every county in the state, is trying to do something with SIMS. But we are way ahead of the curve, and we still have very far to go. But other counties are contacting us regularly and saying, how do you do this? Where can we get this? And Doña Ana County is lucky to not be a super rural county. Yes, we do have some outlying areas, and we understand it's much harder to provide services sometimes there. So, I mean, we're looking at including transportation, anything and everything anybody would need to fill these gaps. What did I leave out? I think you got it. Okay. So we're having a summary meeting this Friday with everybody that was at that June workshop to bring them up to date on what we're doing, what we've done, how far we've come. We've done a lot. It is such a big problem. It's not a quick fix, but we are working steadfastly on it. All right. I'm going to sort of segue into expungement, unless you want to add anything, Jamie. Okay. I was really hoping Miguel would be here for this, because he and Don and our other records department people are spending hours and hours and hours every week on this project. So what happened was, about a year and a half ago, the Supreme Court said when marijuana becomes legal in the state, every court must purge everything to do with the marijuana conviction, which is reasonable. The directive from the Administrative Office of the Courts was, all your convictions should be expunged. The defendants do not apply or ask for expungements. And we had 2 years from when we got this directive to complete this. So that will be the end of this June. We're supposed to have it done. I don't think any court anywhere in the state is going to meet that deadline. It is such a big project. So, because if you think about it, sometimes people were convicted of possession of a marijuana pipe. That's got to go too. So it's just very time intensive. We've got to quash all those warrants. Since Dawn is a bit of an expert on this, I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm just going to say that last January, based on what the Administrative Office of the Courts told us to do, I created a fairly lengthy order, but essentially said court staff shall review every previous citation in its records for possession, delivery, manufacture of paraphernalia, and determine by the text of the citation whether the paraphernalia was used with any illegal substance other than cannabis. And that's got to be completed by June 28th. Every citation going back to the creation of the earth we have to look at. And you can't do it with a computer program. We have to pull everything because sometimes there's a conviction on a docket number for possession of cannabis and resisting, evading, obstructing an officer. We can't eliminate the whole docket, only that one about cannabis. Our records people are just killing themselves trying to meet that deadline. So kudos to you, Dawn. Take it away.
Judge Goldbaum, you have covered everything that I was going to talk about.
Well, let me bring up Miguel's beautiful slide, because they are lovely what he did. Oops, I'm going backwards. Okay, so I think you can read these with me. I don't want to read them to you. I did want to mention one other tangential thing, which is that in 2012, the municipal court went through a conversion process when it went from software called Full Court to the Tyler encode system. That conversion project was huge. It took many, many months to try and scan all those dockets. A few things were lost, and some things before that period, we have no idea what those citations say. We can't necessarily pull up those citations. So we are trying to be as diligent as we can. It is a huge and rotten job to pull every single case in municipal court ever and look for those dockets or convictions, and then we're altering the public document. So what we have to do is make a note. We can't give this information out. It's expunged, except we can't expunge it because the computer won't let us and because that would be altering a public docket. But we're making notes so that if we get a phone call from a potential employer, we can say with a clear conscience, there are no marijuana convictions. Okay, and obviously you can see that something like a pipe that you smoke could be used for cannabis, but it could also be used for a number of other illegal things. And we are trying to parse those out. So, Dawn, you don't want to say anything? You can speak from there.
So my staff and I have broken this down into
Excuse me, Dawn. Can you just state your name and your position, please? Yeah, thanks.
Dawn Schultz, court manager for Las Cruces Municipal Court. And we've broken down this project into 4 phases. The first one consisting of identifying the cases with outstanding warrants and quashing those to prevent someone from being wrongfully arrested or detained. And then we have phase 2, which is the phase that we're currently in and is the most time consuming. This consists of researching all paraphernalia cases to determine if it was related to the use of cannabis, like Judge Goldbaum said. It also consists of researching all related dockets having multiple charges and identifying which cases will require redactions. We currently have 2 full-time employees in our records department, and we're in the process of bringing on 2 additional employees. Phase 3 will consist of expunging the records in our computer system and then the physical redaction of the information in the court's records. Phase 4 will involve the securing or destruction of the records in accordance with state and local policy. That's all I have.
So regardless of how you feel about the legalization of cannabis, I'm guessing you never thought about what would go into trying to get it off someone's record. I certainly never did until this thing slammed us, and it's so huge, but we're doing our best. I'm a little bit counting on the fact that the Supreme Court is going to hit June 28th and say, nobody's done. Maybe we need to give them more time, and maybe we need to give them more direction. But that is what that is. All right. Oops. Something is missing.
You want to take a quick break so council can ask you some questions?
Sure. Oh, wait, is that, no, I'm missing some slides that are important. Oh, well. Yeah, I'll try and answer questions, and if I don't have the answer at hand, I will try to get it to you, and if you have questions that I don't include in my presentation, I'll try to get those to you too. You can email me. So.
Okay. All right, so Councilor Bencomo?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks
And
for
Councilor Beta.
the pause to ask some questions. Thank you, Judge Goldbaum, for joining us. We've been wanting to have you in front of us for quite some time. I appreciate the full length of your presentation, though I mostly have questions regarding competency and mental health cases that come in front of you. But before I go to those questions, maybe my easier one was just on this last one. So you go into this expungement process as soon as someone comes in front of you for any new charge, and then you identify that they have previous charges, and that's how you start identifying expungement?
Not really. No, we're not waiting.
Oh, so you're doing research on literally
totally
everybody.
proactive on every single case. Yeah.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. So you talked about the potentially 12 folks who I would characterize, as just had a conversation with Jamie, as familiar faces who are coming into the court system that have charges brought against them for trespassing, for vandalism, and may also have some sort of mental health situation happening. And then I'm hearing you say, which is really helpful because I did not know, that it is then you refer someone to district court and then it's in their jurisdiction. I did not know that. That could have solved many heartache conversations, to be honest with you. So once that has been determined, what options are at the court's disposal, whether it's you or whether it's district court right now?
Oh, Jamie and I have tried to talk about this too, and right now, when somebody's found incompetent, my option, dismiss, release. That's it.
And what about district court?
What about?
What about district court options? Like, do they have any more options?
The district court does have a mental health, what is it? What's AOT? Assisted outpatient treatment, but it's not automatic. Right, okay, assisted outpatient treatment. It's voluntary, right? Oh, it's civil, okay. So, yeah, they do have a court, it's a treatment court basically for people with mental health challenges, behavioral health challenges. They don't currently accept misdemeanor defendants, which is all I have. So I don't have options, but we're trying to fill that gap.
Right.
Let me mention that New Mexico is with the majority of states that when somebody's found not competent, if it's a felony, if it's a violent felony especially, the district court will order the person to be what's called treated to competency. You try to get them competent enough to stand trial. If that doesn't happen, they can face that amount of time that the conviction would hold in the state hospital. But you also have to understand our state hospital in Las Vegas has a very limited number of beds. Of course, everybody in the state's trying to get those beds, and it makes sense that they're for violent felons. So nobody tries to treat people to competency for misdemeanors.
Okay.
And that's almost nationwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I also appreciate you talking about the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And some of the things you mentioned are first time I'm hearing of them, right? And I'm wondering what can you do to take back to that group? Because right now council is saying we want to work on options. We want to increase the options that are available for folks who are vulnerable, who keep, unfortunately, I mean, Chief can tell you how quickly property crime has increased, and I've said this before. It's not just about a broken window. It's not just about a cash register. It's about people's peace of mind, right? That is not something we can just magically make go away. And so this keeps happening. Many times I'm assuming some of the same folks, right? And so right now we have a council that's saying we really want to come up with some options.
Right.
At what point, I would like also like for you or for this continuum to come to us and say, these are some ideas that we have, because this is priority for us right now.
Sure. The SIMS task force, we're not just working, we're trying to come up with a solution for the entire county. And I think that is where the solution lies for filling the gaps, all the gaps, identifying them and trying to fill them. I wanted to sort of veer off for a second and correct a misconception. I know that Sarah Smith and Juan Garcia and many others are very concerned about the property crime at businesses, and so as am I, but when I get criminal damage to property charges, it is almost never a vandalism of a business. I can't remember the last time I saw one. When I get criminal damage to property citations, and it's rare, it's almost always ex-romantic partners. One of them throws a brick at the other's windshield or throws a brick or a rock through the window. That's what I see. I'm not getting these things where people do things on businesses.
Okay,
yeah,
and so are you?
Now, they may be filed in magistrate court,
That's what I was going to ask you.
but I think it's really hard because what I primarily see are shoplifting and trespass, and it's easier for law enforcement to catch those people, right? They're generally witnesses who see them because they often trespass over and over again at the same place where they've gotten a trespass card. So it's much easier to catch those people and cite them. It's very hard to catch the people, I think, that are doing the vandalism to the businesses.
Sure.
You know, maybe
and so,
cameras
Judge,
will help.
So if those folks are caught, let's say, the officer determines where to file that case?
Yes, they can file it in city court or state court, correct.
And so they would go to magistrate court, is what you're saying?
Some of them may, but I'd be pretty surprised if they were getting a lot of criminal damage to business properties for the same reason. It's just much more difficult, I think, to cite people for that.
Okay. Okay, I may have more questions later. Oh, no, I do have more questions. Just one more. What specialty courts do we have right now in Doña Ana County?
The magistrate court has a DWI drug court, and they let me participate in it for a while, and I did. It's a good program. One problem we had is the statute, the amount of time to resolve a misdemeanor in magistrate court is 18 months. or I'm sorry, the maximum probation is 18 months, and in city court, it's 1 year from beginning to end. So that's a limitation. And then it was just also a little difficult when they met because that court, it meets for several hours. And then there's several in district court. There's a veterans treatment court. We sometimes refer people to that. There's the outpatient treatment. What am I missing? They also have drug court at district court for felonies.
Judge, is there a model where municipal court would have specialty courts?
Oh, sure.
What would be needed for that?
Well, you have to really have a prosecutor, and this is something I was going to talk about later in my presentation, but a prosecutor and like a single defense attorney and a court. And that's it. And the director of Community of Hope's already opened her conference room to us. It's got Wi-Fi. We could use it once, twice a month. I would probably need the support of the council, of the city attorney's office.
I would love to see a proposal. I met with Judge Arrieta a while ago, and he mentioned to me that drug court is significantly less expensive than putting someone in jail. Jail is very expensive for taxpayers. Right. And I would love to see a proposal on what a specialty court could look like for Las Cruces, and if that's coming from you or from legal, whoever, I would be very open to having that discussion, because I think those are the kind of spaces that we are missing for some of the folks who are like familiar faces of the criminal justice system. I may have more questions later, but that's it for me right now, Mayor.
I think I may cover an awful lot of what you're asking me about if you'll let me continue and just jot down your questions.
Well, Judge, I don't know how much longer you have, but we kind of need to speed up what it is you requested. But Councilor Beta has a question. I have a question. You opened yourself up here to allow us to ask you some comments, so I think we'd like to do that.
Yes. How much longer is your presentation as well?
I really only have one other thing to talk about, major thing. Do you want me to come back and do it another time? I think it's the really important part of my presentation.
No. I do have a couple questions then that I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I think, Judge, it's important that us ask these questions because you're going to come in with an ask, and if we don't have this information, this basic information down, I think that's going to cloud our, at least my opinion of what your ask will be.
Councilor Bencomo, I just wanted to say we're billed by the county for our people that are in jail. It's about $102 a day. Treatment courts less than $30 a day, but sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge, for your presentation so far. You had said that the time between kind of entering the system and exiting that whole process is around 182 days for resolution for most cases?
Correct.
Okay. And with that, what is usually the reason for that day? Does that look pretty average for a court system, especially like New Mexico? How has you seen that time frame during your tenure?
We haven't really had difficulty meeting it. Is that your question?
Well, I'm wondering, for efficiency's sake, and I know everybody wants to see resolution when things happen, and if a crime does occur, I'm sure it's peace of mind for those that have been affected on either side that these things are done with that efficient manner. And so I'm curious on where we range as far as does this look like a good time? Have you been able to kind of become more efficient with that process? What does that look like when you have the use of alternative judges? Does that help alleviate time frame? And now we have an alternate judge as well. And so I'm curious to see if that's all working together to make a more efficient system.
We don't have any trouble meeting the 182 days, other than that period of the first 15 months where we were doing things virtually and people who were demanding in-person trials.
What do you say is the average?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the life cycle of a case, most cases settle at pretrial hearing, and that is usually within maybe the 2 months of arraignment. And so that's a plea bargain, basically. And the person knows what they're getting, the prosecutor knows what they're getting, nobody gets 100%, but they get certainty. And there's a lot of benefits to settling at pretrial, and we generally do.
Thank you for that. And then the next question is to follow up with that of use of alternates versus use of your other judge. How is that going so far? What does that caseload look like to see, that process?
To my knowledge, Judge Streeter's planning to resign. I thought it was going to be because she was going back to district court. But when we had the conversations, she said, I really want to be home with my kids. She has a 3-month-old infant and 3 other children, and I totally understand it. But she also has very fixed times during the day, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, when she has to pump breast milk, and that is just not conducive with the schedule we set up for hearings. It takes her about 30 minutes, and she said it's absolutely inflexible. So I'm just covering everything for now.
Ma'am, that seems like an HR issue.
A what? An HR issue?
Yes, Counselor.
I mean, so I had set up a
I'm going to move on to a different line of questioning.
Okay.
Thank you. With that in mind, what modernization have you taken during your tenure for changes with the municipal court, including perhaps computer systems that might be needed?
I would say probably the best thing is, after conversation with the director of the Doñana County Detention Center, we started sending out texts to defendants to remind them of their hearings and due dates for payments. It costs us 20 cents per text, but we've only been doing it for about 6 months, so we don't really have the data. And the other problem is, like, homeless folks often don't have a phone.
Okay. Regarding the building, obviously we saw some statewide issues that had significant security, not only with any elected officials, things like that. May you talk about the security that you have within the facility, any changes that have been made, including things like parking lot structures?
Well, we always have a security guard in the courtroom with anybody who is hearing cases in the courtroom. And we have a security guard at the door. Occasionally, the firm that provides them will provide additional guards if we request them.
The use of cameras?
I'm sorry?
The use of cameras within the system, if you have them around the parking lot structure. I knew that they were there in the past, that the city has paid for that.
We have some cameras that are in the parking lot. We're looking into getting them.
I was told that there were some. Are they not there anymore?
No, they are in the parking lot, but not where people come into the building or the sides of the building, and we're a little concerned about that.
Okay. And then also, with a follow-up for a question about specialty courts, I'm curious if we were to look into that, would we need to make adjustments to our ordinance? It does have here under section 17-32, section A, that the municipal judge, 1, shall be present and shall preside at municipal court for at least 40 hours per week, unless absent for annual leave, sick leave, or in attendance at a municipal judge's conference. And so I know you've been a frequent attendee here at all of our council meetings. I'm sure that eats up at the 40 hours, and I'm curious to see if there's other times, because I know like the time here doesn't count as because you're not presiding over the court. So I'm curious to see how all that stuff would be integrated together.
I'm not sure I understand your question. We don't have dockets on Monday afternoons, And if I have like a doctor's appointment or something, we have an alternate, but I guess I'm not understanding your question.
No, I'm just curious to see if there would be an amendment that is needed for specialty courts so that you can preside over theirs, because our ordinance is pretty specific of just presiding over the municipal court.
It would be helpful.
Okay. And then when it does say this item about shall be present and preside at municipal court for at least 40 hours a week, does that mean present in the building for that amount of time?
I take it to be when the court hours are. I mean, our court's open from 7:30 to 4:30, Monday through Thursday, and we close at 12:30 on Fridays.
And you're able to adhere to the 40 hours?
Yeah, I
Including
also have to work on Sunday mornings for probable cause hearings, so yeah.
Okay. Mayor, that's all my questions for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got a few questions, Judge. Let me kind of go back to earlier when you talked about incompetent, and you said that after so many times, it's remanded to district court, I believe?
Every time.
Every time?
Every time.
Okay. So is it, I'm looking at one particular individual who from January 25th, 2021 to March 11th, 2021, he was on a payment plan because he was arrested for criminal trespassing and some other things. Interestingly, on 7/9 of 2021 through 7/3 of 2022, arrested 60 different times and was let go for dismissed or incompetent. He was charged with criminal trespass, assault, indecent exposure, resisting, obstructing arrest, and shoplifting. How can you, if I was to go to district court, will I find his name on, what will I find?
It sounds like it. It sounds like he's been found incompetent, or excuse me, not competent multiple times, and that's not unusual. And, you know, somebody can be competent and then become not competent and be not competent and become competent. So it does happen occasionally, but, and remember, the referral doesn't have to come from me. It can come from someone at the jail, defense attorney, the officer, city attorney.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that, so whether or not that's in district court or not. So about how many people do you think you saw in 2022? Approximately, it doesn't have to be
Are you
exact.
talking about not competent?
No, just everybody that you see, from traffic tickets to criminal trespass. I mean, just approximately. Again, it's not, it doesn't have to be exact.
No, it's actually on one of my slides. Let's see, slide 18. Okay, the total that was filed in 2022 was 6,486.
And of those, how many were put in jail?
Oh, I don't know.
Just give me a rough estimate.
I don't know, because, I mean, it could have been before they were convicted. It could have been that they were arrested on a warrant from another court. So there's no way for me to isolate that.
How many did you put in jail last week?
I don't know.
You don't know how many you put in jail last week? 1, 10?
Well, no, I held some people in jail that I saw at prison arraignments.
Well, not
But
prison
Mr. Mayor,
arraignments. I'm talking that they came before you and put in jail.
most people enter pleas, and most pleas include a sentence from the prosecutor.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So let's say they don't plead incompetency, and someone comes and they're arrested for criminal trespass, and then they show up, they're released on their own recognizance. Do you tell them anything like, hey, if I see you here again, I'm going to have to, just like the DWIs they have increased penalties as they do more. Do you tell them that? Do you talk with them and say, if I see you again, something else is going to happen to you?
Absolutely not. That would be completely unethical for me to do that.
So you can't make that a condition, that if you're letting them out on their own recognizance, and if they...
I thought you were talking about sentencing. No, I do it frequently as conditions of release.
Okay, so...
New charges, failing to attend court,
Okay,
yes.
right. Because I remember one time you telling me that, and now I'm going to just switch for this brief time to homeless, you were telling me that the homeless, the reason why a lot of these are dismissed is because they won't show up. They don't come back for the second hearing.
I don't dismiss them if they don't come back. I issue a warrant.
Okay. All right. So in a warrant for their arrest.
Correct.
Okay. So in March 21st, 2022, the city passed a resolution allowing municipal court to squash the failure to pay warrants that dated back like from 1900 to 2017, amounted to some $3 million. After that date, 2017 to today, have you cleared or got rid of any failure to pay warrants?
We set ability to pay hearings on every case where somebody owes fines and they're not paying. If they show up, we put them on a payment plan. If they don't, and it's the first time, we issue a summons. And then if they don't, it's a warrant.
Okay, but my question is, after March 2022, because we identified these failure to pay warrants, but it dated to sometime in 2017. Let's just say since 2018, because you started serving in 2017, all right? So since 2018 up until today, have you unilaterally squashed these failure to pay warrants?
We did. We quashed the warrants and set everything for a failure to pay hearing if they owed and weren't paying.
Okay, so
If they had not updated their address with us and we got return mail, that would trigger a warrant.
okay, I understand about the warrant. I'm talking about what I'm trying to get at is you have to, that's city money, that's taxpayers' money that's owed, right? That's why the city council has to sign off on that resolution that we did in March of last year, okay? So I don't know how more clear to ask you this, Judge, is since 2018, I'll just make it since 2018, so 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, till today, these failure to pay warrants, have you just squashed them and basically said, oh, you don't need to pay that anymore?
If we didn't have information like an order to show cause or returned mail, I had to give them an ability to pay hearing. And if they don't show up, it's the summons and then the warrant.
So you're saying you have not squashed or get rid of any failure to pay warrants since 2018, other than the time that we gave permission, the court's permission to do that in March 21 of 2022. That's the only time those failure to pay warrants, those are the only ones that you were allowed to just squash, to let those go away.
No, we did void some warrants because I didn't want the court to become like Ferguson, Missouri, where you just incarcerate people because they're poor. So yes, I did. That's why I wanted to have ability to pay hearings.
Okay, so when did the city council approve those? Because again, even though we keep separate, we are theoretically the executive branch of the city, and that's the money, and that's why it has to. There's a city code, Las Cruces Municipal Code, that requires, and that's why we did it in March of 2022, and that's why I wanted to find out if you did squash failure to pay warrants from 2018 on up to now, and you said you think you did.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they were issued without hearings. Yes. Go ahead.
I believe I might have a copy, but can you get me that copy? Or
A copy of
those warrants that you squashed, the failure to pay, because that has to have city council approval, Judge. That's why we did the resolution in March of 2022, March 21st.
Well, I'm not giving them amnesty on paying. They still owe the money.
I agree, they still owe the money, but again, it has to be, the approval for that to happen is for the city council. Like, for example, when the city gets rid of utility bills, that doesn't mean that they don't owe us. That just means that we don't carry it on the books. We've got rid of them. And I think much like this is the same thing here.
Well,
So
I think that the court has discretion to quash warrants and try
Then
to
why
get
did-
the money other ways.
Then why did we do the resolution to do this in March of 2022?
I am unfamiliar with it. I was not involved and I wasn't here, so.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I think that's really the only questions that I have. And, okay. If you want to go ahead and proceed with your,
Okay, I'm sorry this didn't make it into a slide. I thought it did, but, so if you'll go back and look at the slide for, the police hours and also indigent representation costs. What I want to present to you is something that's being done in the Santa Fe Municipal Court. It's similarly situated. They have a full-time judge, an attorney that occasionally hears cases. Everything else is pretty similar, but they have a single defense attorney and a single prosecutor so that the officers don't have to come in and spend thousands of hours at pretrial hearings, which is probably one of the least favorite parts of their job, I'm guessing. And what it does is it eliminates invoices for multiple attorneys. There aren't lawsuits from panel attorneys suing us for payment. There's no need for auditing and accounting of attorney appointments, no need to create contracts for attorneys. You stop having no-shows by panel attorneys. It saves thousands of dollars even after hiring a full-time defense attorney and a full-time prosecutor. Appeals by indigent defendant will always have the same attorney as the underlying matter. And by the way, the public defender presentation, that was incorrect. We do appear in district court on appeals. It saves officer hours. Officers only have to appear as witnesses in trials, not for pretrials. They don't have to present their cases. Cases don't get dismissed at pretrial for officer failure to appear, makes scheduling hearings easier, decreases the likelihood of dismissal due to the violation of the 6-month rule, and trials are conducted by professionals, not people who have almost no training in how to present a case. And it makes it much easier to have that partnership between the court and the city for specialty projects, treatment, courts, and so on. So I think if you looked at what we're spending on panel attorneys, that would more than cover a full-time defense attorney. The only cons that I came up with were needing space to house the prosecutor and the defense attorney, needing ample notice from them for time off requests. Unplanned day offs would likely require some scheduling issues, and the city might have to produce more discovery. I know the city attorney's office is shorthanded right now, and I think that hiring assistant city attorneys that have to have a breadth of knowledge in multiple areas has proved really difficult. But I think that hiring a single prosecutor and a single defense attorney would not be problematic. There are many, many attorneys in this community that have been prosecutors and defense attorneys, and I think that those would really appeal to people, those jobs. So that's something that I am asking you to consider doing to make that change. I'm seeing puzzlement.
I will tell you this, Judge, that Ifo and I, we met with the DA, ironically, at a breakfast, and we were talking about how I believe there would be some changes. I think I've heard council talk about they want to be able to prosecute domestic violence or some other DWI, other things, and he's open to working with the city. So please allow us to kind of work with him and see what we can do that might also benefit what you're talking about as well.
To work with Mr. Byer? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct.
Oh. I'm not sure how that would affect the city attorney office.
Well, it would be, a city attorney would work with the DA's office as well. So, Jocelyn, do you want to talk about?
Yes, well, I just have one follow-up question, actually, on On the numbers that you presented, the total numbers for 2022, 4,869 cases. Are you proposing that a prosecutor and defense attorney handle all of those cases?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it could be done. I think it would be expedited, and I think it could be done.
And I think maybe we can have a discussion about this later.
I'd appreciate it.
One of my concerns is just that, according to ethical standards, both parties, the prosecutor and the defense attorney, have to be able to ethically handle that caseload. And although the American Bar Association hasn't, I don't believe, established an exact number of how many cases you can handle, the suggestions are around 200 or 300 per year for misdemeanors. And that would call for about 24 attorneys at that number.
Well, remember, a lot of cases get dismissed for a variety of reasons, but let's have this conversation. I think it's important.
Yes, Judge Goldbaum.
My last slide, actually, that I think did not make it on here. Oh, it did. Okay, it's how Miguel collated the sources. So, I mean, I was kind of interested in hearing what Chief Dominguez thought about not having to have his attorneys in court all that time.
And if I may on that topic as well, one of the issues, one of the issues that presents on that topic as well, Judge Goldbaum, is just that the prosecutors, when they are officer prosecute cases, they are prosecuting. And so if they were not present, who would be the person prosecuting, and would that be you?
No. For trials, they would be there as witnesses.
And then who would be the prosecutor in that case?
The prosecutor who hopefully the city would hire to prosecute.
So this is only in the event that that there is a system established where there is an assigned prosecutor and defense attorney?
Yeah, I don't really see how it would work otherwise.
Okay, because that was my concern. And then one thing that I would propose to you, as far as if you're concerned about officer time, is just to allow telephonic appearance, so that you take out that driving time and they can appear while they're in their vehicle.
The reason it didn't work when we were doing it before was getting signatures, not just from defendants, but also from officers.
And
it was tricky.
If you can approve anything like an e-sign type program, even Adobe has, you can send for signatures. If you accept that, I think that everyone would be okay with that as well.
Let's talk.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I'm going to ask you if you would address whatever questions you have to the city council and then the city manager.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Okay. You had some question you
I
wanted to
have
ask.
a comment.
Oh, okay. Yes, Councilor.
Yeah, I am very disturbed by your presentation. I don't think it's totally appropriate for you to be discussing this directly with our city attorney. I don't know what has given you the authority. On what authority do you believe you have the right to come to address questions directly to our city attorney, to presume that this body is going to in any way go outside of the scope of whatever we have in the municipal code insofar as the structure of the municipal court? So I don't understand some of your presentation, frankly, with all due respect, is rambling. I don't know if that's your demeanor. I don't know if that's just a tactic to wear us down. But my patience has really run out. So I don't know what conversations you've had with the mayor or our city attorneys or our city manager or anybody else on the stage or the rest of the world. But all I know is that it seems highly inappropriate for you to come before this body and then to be speaking directly to our city attorney and suggesting that you have meetings based on what you believe will come to a good end. You haven't showed us a model of how this works. You rambled something about some city somewhere in the world that has something going, and I don't really understand I don't understand why you're here. I don't know what your means are, what your intent is. And frankly, I'm frustrated, and I'd like to go home at 5 o'clock the way you go home at 5 o'clock. Usually we have pressing matters that keep us here till close to 10 o'clock at times at night, starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When we've had our community meetings, we don't have those anymore. We'd be there till about 10 o'clock at night. Right now, I don't have any patience to be here any longer. And I'm very sorry to express that to you, Judge Goldbaum, but that's really what I have to express to you. I'm exasperated, and I don't understand any of, there's no rhyme or reason to what you are proposing. You give us all these statistics, but all these numbers, but there's no reference to the importance or reference to support your, whatever it is you're asking for. And I would ask our city manager to direct, I don't know if this is appropriate, but as he's under our direction, I don't think it's appropriate for our city attorney to be having a discussion with Judge Goldbaum regarding any potential changes in the municipal court, especially if they're outside the scope of the municipal code. And I don't want to place any blame on Attorney Garrison, but in any way, shape, or form, but I just don't understand what's going on and why it's going on. And the information presented doesn't support the request. Thank you.
I've concluded, but if I was out of line with the city attorney, I apologize. I wasn't trying to put her on the spot. So I've concluded unless there are other questions.
Councilor Cram?
I just wanted to say, Councilor Flores, part of this was my request to learn more about municipal court, and I do think that I have learned a number of things today that I didn't know before, and so I appreciate Judge Goldbaum's sort of coming and sharing these with us. But I would ask those linked Excel files that are included there, and the one that you sent us, there are only 2 linked, so I think it might not be the most updated one. So if we could also have that most updated file, that would be excellent.
You mean for the slides?
Yeah, this slide that shows these 4 data sources on the one that you sent us only has 2. So, and I appreciate you sharing the data that you've shared. And I look forward to us thinking about alternative ways of addressing crime in whatever aspect we're considering it. But just to your point, Councilor Flores, this is in part because I felt like I needed to know more. So thank you.
Okay to email that info to you?
Please, to the city clerk.
Christine?
Yes, Christine, please.
Okay.
So Judge, you're done with your presentation?
I am, thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved,
So moved by
Abeta.
Flores.
I'm sorry, Councilor Abeta made a motion. Who?
Second by Flores.
Second by Councilor Flores, that we adjourn. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Beta?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Cran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondeta?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, we are adjourned. It's 4:29 p.m. All right, thank you.
No, sorry.